my name's Ralph and welcome back to the channel. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about your clutch hub and on your bike and how that can lead to problems with your transmission. Now I know a lot of people don't think how one can relate to the other, but it does. And hopefully throughout this video we can show you some things that will help you identify maybe a potential problem that's coming your way. The easiest way is when you pull your clutch hub off, and you're trying to replace probably the primary case bearing on it, and you look in there and you say, yeah, that's been destroyed. Have a quick look into your clutch hub at the rear end of it, on the back side. If you see that there's little teeth like this all broken off, it's an indication that there's a problem there, but it's probably going a lot deeper. Now, what I've found by trying to research things on the internet, there's a lot of knowledgeable people out there, and I'm going to try to pass on a little bit of knowledge that I've found. Now, once again, I'm not the gospel, I'm not the master, but I'm trying to help others out who may have potential problems. So let's start with your clutch basket. When you pull that off the bike, have a look inside and see if these teeth are breaking off. If these teeth are breaking off, possibly you should be checking your transmission. Now, from what I'm told, you can pull the clutch cover off and look inside there, because the oil tends to accumulate there from your transmission. And if you got like a gray sludge in there, then you've obviously got troubles with your transmission bearings. Hopefully you pull it off and it'll be clean in there and the damage has not been done yet. What happens is when these clutch hub splines start to break off, they go down, and the filings of course go everywhere. They go into the bearing on the clutch hub itself, and that's going to tear it all up, and that's what causes it to be torn up on the race itself. Once it gets in there, it just starts to grind everything up. Now, most things that I've read say that this can happen between 15,000 and 28,000 miles. So it's a good time to be checking for that. So I'm going to try to show you a few things and talk about it as we go along, and hopefully this will help clarify some things and give you something to look for and possibly save you having to rebuild your transmission in the future. Alright, let's have a look at it. Now, this is such a sort of a drawing, and I'm certainly not an artist, but it'll give you an idea of what the inside of your transmission looks like. This would be the right side of your bike if you were sitting on it, and this is where your clutch cover is. And these shafts are held in there by nuts on the end of these shafts, and this is what they call the trap door that it's all hooked to. So inside your transmission you have first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, which are a one-piece gear. And on the main shaft side, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, which is your main drive gear, and this is the one that's sticking through. On a 5-speed transmission, the gear ratio is 1:1, which means that for every revolution that the gear turns, the back wheel turns 1. When you get to the 6 speeds, in their ultimate wisdom, they've changed it to, well, they say approximately 8.3 to 8.9 revolutions to 1. What that really means is that the rear wheel only turns 0.8 or 0.9 of a revolution, while the engine does 1 complete revolution. That means that there's a lot more torque transmitted to the unsupported shaft, with the clutch basket hanging way off out here in the end. And this is the problem with the 6 speeds, that the clutch basket is now so far out here. Now the stress is being put on this main shaft as you shift. It's pulling this way, when you're pulling on it, and the belt is pulling this way. So there's a lot of stresses on this, and the clutch basket is out a long ways. Now what they're saying is that possibly shifting from 5th to 6th is the problem, is that up and down from 5th to 6th is putting so much torque on the outside of this clutch basket that it's causing it to rock and break off the teeth inside of the clutch hub itself. It's hard to imagine since that's on a spline shaft and bolted on there tight, but that seems to be what's happening. And with the higher horsepower motors and tricks that they're doing to them now, it's becoming a lot more obvious of a problem. They can say, for example, that accelerating too often in 6th gear and not downshifting to 5th contributes to this problem with the main shaft and the trap door bearings over here. There's a lot of torque available with the powerful engines today. People do accelerate in 6th gear without downshifting, although a lot of times if they were down into 5th in a lot of situations instead of lugging in 6th, it would alleviate the problem, so some people say. As you can see, because of the proximity of it here, it's easy when these start to break off of the backside of your clutch hub, the small bearing race that's in here on your primary case where your bearing runs on, the little pieces will now go straight down in there and all through that bearing. So seeing that the race that's in here, and we can just kind of put it in here because I don't have it, race, because this is your primary case. Once those grindings off of the hardened inside clutch hub get in there, they totally tear up the bearing and such inside. So if you have a mega problem in there and that bearing is really destroyed, that race, you should be pulling the clutch cover off the back and inspecting the transmission to see if you got gray sludge and stuff in there. If you do, it's a sign you're going to need a transmission rebuild. Remember that it's not the drive shaft itself here that the pieces are breaking off. They're breaking off of the clutch hub itself and going down in there. So it's not a failure of the main shaft, it's a failure of the clutch hub here. With these added stresses and torques from the belt pulling this way and the drive engine pulling this way, this is out here so far on the end that the stresses are making this basket go like this. And it's quite common, especially in cases where you've got primary chain tensioners tightening up, which they're doing on a lot of models by themselves and causing problems that way. Then the stress factor becomes even more. When the belts are over tightened or your primary chain is very tight, this makes the whole thing a bigger problem because there's undue stress this way pulling hard and there's undue stress this way pulling hard. So the transmission is naturally going back and forth as you shift gears, causing more wear on the bearings. Now this is an obvious sign that your transmission is under stress and that problems are going to develop. The problem with the transmission eating itself inside and chewing up the bearings is that there's so much torque and thrust applied on the main shaft by the pulling of this and the clutch basket working its way back and forth that it tends to put stress on the outer bearings here as well as these bearings. And because that stress is applied and back and forth, it tends to chew up these bearings inside. This means there's a lot more torque being transmitted to the unsupported main shaft with the same clutch basket hanging way out here off of the end. So the trapdoor bearings wear prematurely because this whole thing is wanting to go this way like this. And the main bearings chew up, the trapdoor bearings chew up, and you got big problems. If you see this developing with your clutch basket and these things breaking off in here, it's time to possibly have a look at your transmission because it's showing you undue stress loads are happening out here and the torque back and forth is working enough to break these splines. If it's breaking these splines, there's a good chance that the torque is also happening in here and causing undue stress or pressure points on the bearings all around. So in the end, what can you do to save yourself some trouble? Well, some people suggest that when you're pulling up the stoplights or before you're pulling away, pull the clutch in, give the transmission a chance to settle down in there before you pop it in gear. They say this might help a lot. Oils, use a heavier oil in your transmissions, possibly. But pulling the clutch in and giving it time to happen rather than just pulling it in and jamming it might help you save a little bit on the clutch basket as it lets everything settle. So hopefully this has given you some sort of perspective on what can and what cannot happen in there. But it's obvious to say that if you pull that clutch hub off and you see teeth broken off the back, you've got a problem that's developing there. The clutch hub is replaceable without too much trouble. Once you're into a transmission rebuild, that can be quite expensive and extensive. So check those out. Don't just pull it off and go, oh yeah, okay, the race is bad and the bearing is bad in the primary case, and we'll do that. Not very often do guys flip it over and look inside the clutch hub to see. But if you've got a 6-speed from 2007 to 2010, this becomes more critical on these models. So do check in there and hopefully you won't have a problem. So there's a lot of good information out there on the internet for it if you go look specifically. If you didn't know about it, you wouldn't be looking for it. But if you can, I've read an article there by Dr. Chaos, which explains this to a T. And there's quite a few other ones out there who are more technologically advanced than I am. So you've got to go along and listen to these guys and see what they say and how they explain it out. And hopefully this will help you with your bike. So feel free to comment in the section below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on things. As I say, I'm just trying to pass on some thoughts that I have. You may have better information than I do, and I'd be very interested in hearing about it because I love to learn new things. So don't hesitate to comment. These are the tips that I know. Good luck. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, do these things, and it helps our channel to grow. We hope to be here for the long run, not the short run. See you in the next video.